All right, it is quarter after. Welcome, everybody. Just out of curiosity, how many people here have actually tried working with LLMs at this point? Some. How many people are unsure if this is just a flash in the pan or if this is just going to turn out to be some fad and not useful? Iffy? How many people are iffy on, is this genuinely useful? Okay. Heidi and I, this is Heidi right here, Heidi Porter. Heidi and I put this presentation together. We have a fairly strong point of view on the value of LLMs, and I think that'll become clear as we go through here. And Heidi, jump in if you have a different thought, but I am speaking for myself, and Heidi can speak for herself if she wants to contradict. And I believe this technology is fundamentally different from anything we've worked with before. You know, back when D3 charts were a cool thing and everyone's like, wow, we can make these really nice charts and stuff like that. D3 did charts. LLMs do everything. Everything that was ever written in Stack Overflow is in an LLM. You know, graduate level expertise in various fields of science are in the LLM. So unlike D3, which did charts, this can do all kinds of stuff. You know, there have been examples where someone used this to run a little chat bot for a car dealership, and someone went in and asked it about Planck's constant or something like that, and he gave this very nice detailed explanation. It's like, boy, the service department's really going the extra mile here for these people about their cars. So anyway, we'll make our case, and you can decide at the end if you agree with us or not. So, who am I? As of today, I'm Heidi's sock puppet. So I will be speaking for both of us, but my background is I was a Claire's sales engineer in the early 90s, wrote a couple books, worked with FileMaker Pro Advisor magazine. I was a technical editor there. And I helped create the very first FileMaker 7 certification program. So that was an interesting experience. Our agenda. So some of the questions around AI is, will this last? You know, what kind of money are we talking about? Are people making investments? Do businesses believe? What sort of future directions are there? But, you know, to me, the heart of this presentation is this third bullet here, the success factors. AI projects have a really, really high failure rate, like double the level of failure rate for regular software projects. So be careful with this stuff, I guess is the overriding message there. Touch on some of the regulatory stuff. I think that's less interesting because it's eating the world. And so sooner or later, some of the barriers will fall. So let's start off with the business emphasis. Everyone's heard of Gartner, the Gartner Group. As you can see here, they predict that the software market's going to grow 19% annually. Orca Cloud Security, who I'd never heard of before I started looking up some stats here, came out with a State of AI Security report in just around summertime. And they found a ton of stuff. They are a security auditor. And so their clients tend to be on the larger size, have a lot of cloud infrastructure. So they were surveying AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud, Alibaba Cloud from January through the end of August in this year. And they found that 56% of organizations have adopted AI to build custom applications. So depending on who your customers look like, you know, if they're on the larger side, they're probably already looking at this stuff. GPT-3.5 was used by 79% of organizations in their cloud. It's been a free tier this year. Money, let's talk money. How much are people spending on this? A lot. So just last year, the total AI startup funding was $42.5 billion, 39 billion euros. Funding was up 14% year over year in the US. So it's interesting that in different geographic territories, the money is sort of moving up or down. So up in the US, down in the EU, down a lot in Asia. Generative AI, which is, you know, LLMs and diffusion models that can create videos and images and things like that are attracting, you know, fully half of the funding. And then, you know, there was just a earnings season in the U.S. where we sort of heard what's going on with a lot of these companies, but revenue aside, investors are pouring money into these companies. They're throwing money at everyone. There was an interesting interview at Stanford with Eric Schmidt, who's the former CEO of Google back in the early 2000s. And in it, he said, none of us can figure out who the winners are going to be here. So out of an abundance of caution, we're funding everything. And so he's a venture capitalist. The interesting one to me is a venture capitalist called In-Q-Tel, which used to be called Peleus. And for those of you not familiar with them, they are the venture capital arm of the CIA in the US. And so they invest in technologies so that the intelligence community and adjacently the defense community gets dibs on that. By being a significant investor, they get to hear what's going on, they get first look at things. And so this is not the regular hype cycle of, oh, blockchain is going to take over the world. That sort of fizzled out to not very much. This is not going anywhere. There's too much going on here. This is literally weapons-grade technology. So what does the investment look like? Perhaps the most interesting thing to me is the most active investor in the space is Google. They have, and this was as of like mid-year, they've invested in 9 significant companies. The other interesting thing is the paper, Attention is All You Need, that sort of kicked off the whole LLM boom, was authored by Google researchers. And Google has Gemini as their sort of flagship product, which is routinely getting its butt kicked by the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic and Mistral and other places. It does not do well. And yet, for being, an also-ran in the category, they are making billions of dollars off this product that is okay, And so imagine when you turn to the real quality offerings of like Anthropic and OpenAI, the revenue potential of this space, the whole space, is gigantic. Nicholas had he touched on this in the last session, for those of you who were at his session earlier. It is super expensive to train these models. And it's an interesting thing because typically in the world of software, software is written. And when you write an LLM model, you sort of create the bones of it, and then the software is grown. These internal connections are made by ingesting data and making correlations. And so the cost, this is a logarithmic scale, 10, 100, this does not go up linearly. So you can see that I think in 2022 when ChatGPT was born, if you will, that cost less than $10 million to create. And now we're looking at greater than $100 million to train a new state-of-the-art model. And at the current trajectory, you're looking at greater than $1 billion in a few years. Sticking with the current technology stack, this is going to be, it's nightmarishly expensive. And the way these costs break out are 57% is hardware. And so that's why these, Microsoft, Google, Meta are spending billions and billions of dollars building out data centers. And they're building out data centers with these super power-hungry GPUs. And so now you also hear these crazy stories about them buying nuclear reactors. Like, hey, 3 Mile Island, that nuclear reactor that you mothballed back in the 1970s, bring it back up, we'll buy all your power. There's, open discussions about the United States collaborating with Canada to make like this big energy consortium to feed the beast of these very power-hungry data centers. So super expensive, and it's just getting more expensive as we go, which is the crazy part. That's expensive. $250 billion in spending in the sector next year. As I said, it was just earnings center in the US. There was a lot of grumbling from investors as, the likes of Microsoft and Meta were saying, yep, we're going to be spending, 20, 30, $40 billion in the next quarter just on data center build out. And at first I thought, this is like a death race. These companies are in such a tight struggle for dominance in the AI space. It's like if we stop spending, then the other company is going to win, and then we're going to be a loser, and we're going to, have to adapt to their technology infrastructure as opposed to them adapting to ours. And so it's almost like, wow, here are the richest companies in the world, the only companies that can afford this race, and they're stuck in it. They can't leave or they lose, and so they have to spend. That was my initial read on the crazy build out, but Microsoft used some interesting language. They said what do they call it? A demand signal. So the CFO, Amy Hood of Microsoft, she said she expects CapEx to increase on a sequential basis given our cloud and AI demand signal. So basically, as soon as they build out these new data centers, they're immediately at capacity and consumed. And now they need more capacity. So they're building out like crazy because as soon as they build them, they're immediately fully utilized. So it's crazy. This is a year-over-year comparison. Microsoft, huge jump on Microsoft. Meta, Alphabet, Amazon. So the capital expenditure is not just increasing year over year, but it's accelerating quarter over quarter. So this is crazy how fast this is ramping up. This is literally unsustainable, and yet here we are. The pace of release from like OpenAI and Anthropic has slowed down literally because they can't get enough compute to train the new models. And so they're bottlenecked right now on just the infrastructure it takes to drive these things. So that's pretty crazy. One of the sort of symptoms of these fad flash-in-the-pan technologies is everybody's all excited about them, but nobody's making any money. These people are making crazy amounts of money. So, and this is revenue that was projected from mid-year. So Anthropic was $850 million. NVIDIA, of course, is making most of the money because everyone has to buy their chips to build out these data centers. So they're making out like bandits. Google is a little trickier to sort of figure out where their revenue is coming from. I'll let you take that picture and then I'm going to go into the Google stuff. So Google, unlike NVIDIA, they make chips, they sell chips, and it's a very clear revenue stream. Google has all these Google applications, Google Cloud offering, they're making money off of that. Google alone makes their own chips. They have tensor processing units, or TPUs, so they have data centers where they can host TPUs. They had an interesting announcement probably 2 or 3 months ago where they had developed the ability to generate the game Doom in real time. No pre-generated game. It'll just frame generate 30 frames per second off of a single TPU to generate the game Doom and playable just out of thin air. It's crazy. So anyway, very similar to how Apple is integrating AI in their different software product offerings, Google has sort of permeated their product line with AI, and so it's incremental revenue throughout there. But it's interesting, billions in revenues, 2 million developers. And again, they're the also-ran. They're not doing great. I mean, some of their stuff is pretty spectacular, like their game generation and things like that. But they've had a lot of misfires, embarrassing public incidents that I'll get to in a minute here. And yet, look at all the money they're making for something that's, 4th or 5th place, maybe. Zeki Research is a human resource research company. So, interesting stat, 20,000 companies in the West are trying to hire AI experts. And so whether or not you believe in the gold rush or not, there is a huge demand out there for this expertise. And if you want to get in on this, I suggest you develop this expertise because people are dying for it. The other interesting thing is that, OpenAI, way back in the day, General Electric was considered the incubator for managerial talent that then went out and worked at all these other companies. And that has proven to be the case with OpenAI, where OpenAI had, strong founders and the best researchers, and all those people have just sort of trickled out, started up their own things, and then immediately had billions of dollars thrown at them to, fund their new venture. So anybody coming out of OpenAI is having no difficulty at all getting whatever venture they want to start funded. So the number of companies is exploding. Interesting study here. This is a Harvard Business School paper about the perils of doing artificial intelligence projects. I recommended reading it. It may save you some stub toes. But the study that came out said, AI will enable workers to complete tasks more quickly, their quality of their output will improve. So the Harvard Business School study said that consultants, the big four consultants, with access to GPT-4 increase their productivity on a selection of consulting tasks by 12% and change, speed by 25%, and quality by 40%. So this is a great enabler. I've heard the quote that AI isn't coming for your job. Someone else who's using AI to improve their productivity by 50% is coming for your job. And so if you don't want to get left in the dust, you need to get on board with this technology, because it is I hate the term force multiplier because I think it's overused, but it is a facilitator. It can help you do the grunt work of basic research or maybe some wordsmithing or things like that, productivity tasks that take some time. It will take those off your plate, and I like to think of it as a great brainstorming partner. So if you're trying to think up some text or something like that, it can say, what about this? And you're like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go with that. So as you might expect, these productivity studies have caught the attention of many business leaders. And so you get this. So 96% of leaders expect AI to boost their worker productivity. And it's had very mixed results. So people like coders, software developers like us, have, pretty good results with it. But these business leaders are trying to spread AI over the company like spreading butter on toast. And, that works well or not so well depending on the type of tasks that people are working with. This is not a great stat, where 70% of workers report that it's actually made their jobs harder. So they get this, probably using something like Copilot. And they're like, well, now I have to look at this and check it. It's like having a sort of competent intern working with you. I need to check all their work and make sure they're doing it. And so if it's pouring this stuff out, now you have all this supervisory task work that you have to do to make sure the product that is coming out of your work center is accurate. And so then you get these people who are burned out because they're having to do all this extra work to curate the results of the AI helpers, as it were. So 39% of workers spend more time reviewing or moderating AI-generated content. The U.S. Census Bureau did a survey over the summer, just asking companies in the U.S., and this is U.S., but I would imagine it would be similar in the EU. In the last 2 weeks, did this business use AI? Mostly no's. And then it said, during the next 6 months, do you think this business will be? And, still significant numbers of no's, but a lot of do not knows. So there are a lot of proof of concept projects out there being worked on. So let's take a second to look at Code Assist. So everybody's heard of Copilot, GitHub Copilot. Microsoft has it now. So you have Code Assist. And I think this is an existential threat to FileMaker, because FileMaker does not have Code Assist. And this has rapidly become what we might colloquially call table stakes, to be a contender in the low-code space. So this one is Crust AI. You can just write a prompt and boom, you get an application coming out of it. This one is, who's that? Bubble IO, for those of you not familiar with it. Strong competitor to FileMaker. They have a very pretty significant user base. Airtable. Airtable I'm not as worried about. Airtable ran out of funding. It seemed like their end game was to get acquired by Apple or somebody like that. And I've seen a lot of anecdotal evidence that they're running on a skeleton crew and support requests aren't being answered and things like that. But everybody has AI these days. Now, what that means practically speaking, we don't know, but it certainly seems to be a marketing signal that if you want to be a player here, you need to be AI. Here's OutSystems, another competitor. Oracle Apex, which I hadn't really been tracking much, but build applications in the cloud with browser AI assistance. Here's another one. Appian. What's this last one? That is, I forget who that is. Oh, ServiceNow. There we go. And then this is something that Chris Hippolyte posted on LinkedIn a little while ago. Some of you may have seen this, but this is him on his phone. He's chatting with Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and he just does a very simple prompt, create a bill splitting application that can be used for multiple people. Have sliders, set percentages. So there's the prompt. It's 2 sentences. Here's the answer. There it is, writing the React. And so now React is typically not considered to be low code. It's React. It's code. But when you are able to do it like this, it is now low code. So all these other competitors, Rust or C or whatever, that are not considered low code application environments become low code when you can create those applications with a prompt. And so here it is. That took all of 60 seconds, 2 minutes to write an app that, I'd be happy to call that my work if I built that in FileMaker. Like, yeah, that's pretty slick. How about that? So it's crazy. So, Heidi and I stand by this message that LLMs are coming for us all. If you're an application developer right now, watch your back, because I think it's going to get pretty interesting in the next 12 to 24 months that application developers are going to become an endangered species. But we'll see. We'll see if that holds up. So Code Assist is an obvious huge leverage area for where these things can really add to your life. But beyond that, text copy generation. I just read an interesting post by someone who works at a local TV station. And there's a company called QAI that is able to automate 80% of television production. So they're going to have one person who supervises all this, and all of it is going to be done by AI, doing the editing, the whole bit. They've commodified the expertise of video production people. And so most of the station is getting laid off. And if it succeeds at that station, they're going to spread it to the rest of the network. So if you can imagine some of these large TV networks, pretty damaging for a lot of different kinds of livelihoods of different occupations. Search and recommendation, obviously the legal profession who has to wade through tons of discovery documents and things like that. This is a game changer for them. Evaluating results, forecasting prediction, some fraud detection. Heidi's a little iffy on that one. I don't know if she agrees with the fraud detection one, but it seems to be a use case. Semantic search you've already seen. Ronnie Rios had a nice demo about that. And semantic search is fine as far as it goes. It's a really nice add for FileMaker because we've never had that capability before. And soon with the visual models, we can actually search for visual content in container fields and things like that. And so for years, I've had customers ask me personally, it's like, hey, it'd be great if I could search something on a PDF in a container field and stuff like that. And so to be able to add these capabilities are nice, but they're very incremental. This is a fundamentally much more powerful technology than that. We're taking baby steps when this can, I would guess in the next 12 months we'll be able to create FileMaker files by using an LLM. And then there's this, which is something that one of the guys who left Anthropic actually is warning people about. He's like, you do not want to let LLMs recursively improve themselves. So if you could say, here's a standard for, if I ask you these 20 questions, I would expect to get these 20 results. And then run your own test, set up an agent, run your own test against yourself, have another agent be the tester and one be the testee, and say, how are you performing on these 20 questions? And if it's not good, it's like, okay, tweak the prompt a little bit or tweak its code a little bit. And then try it again. You do an A/B test. Which one was better? Keep that one, toss the other one, try it again. With enough compute, you can just iterate endlessly. And before you know it, these things are better and better and better. And now that Anthropic has released computer control, where the thing can basically drive your computer. So you have recursive improving code. Let me play the video here for you. This is from Microsoft.
One of the coolest things I have seen recently is with O1 coming to GPT, or rather to GitHub Copilot, you can sort of use AI to do the next level of optimization. I think what you have on the slides, behind me is the autoencoder we use for GitHub Copilot is being optimized by O1. So think about the recursiveness of it, which is we're using AI to build AI tools to build better AI. So that's sort of, it's just a new frontier.
So there's that. And then, as I mentioned, now that Anthropic is releasing computer control, it's called computer use in their parlance. They launched 2 updated versions of Cloud AI large language model. And right now, the gatekeeper is you. You, the user, can grant the LLM access to control certain aspects of your computer. Drive a browser, maybe run the command line if you're brave. And while, if you allow it to do this, the LLM will not train on any of that data. So maybe you jump on your bank accounts or transfer money or, do some sort of recurring task that you need to do. So it said they won't train on your data that is discovered by allowing it to drive the bus on your computer, if you will. They did say that this new approach towards training AI computer navigation will help, So they'll basically use the methods that you use to say, oh, we need to optimize for this sort of task because this is what people are trying to do with it. And so, cool, right? If you have a lot of rote tasks that you have to do on your computer, what could go wrong? And so Pliny the Liberator is a person on Twitter, formerly Twitter X, and his or her specialty is jailbreaking LLMs. And so these companies release these LLMs and say, hey, this thing's perfectly safe. We put guardrails up, no worries about it. And then he goes in and proves them wrong. And so he or her, is known for doing this. And so he did, since we now have computer use, he's like, all right, let's take it for a test drive. What can we do here? And so encrypt user files, demand cryptocurrency, write a phishing email, create a payload, attach the payload. I mean, this thing can basically become its own cyber criminal and send the email from your computer. And so, not scary at all, huh? We'll see. So, pivoting to more research, a company called Catalan. Every year they come up with a state of software quality report, and this is about software quality. So, SQA, quality professionals. This is sort of the definitive annual report hosted by Catalan. And so they're looking at trends, challenges, breakthroughs, and software testing. And they sort of pull this from thousands of quality assurance professionals. So here's what they got from the industry of quality software testers. So AI adoption up by 15%, and that's just from earlier in the year. So I would expect, again, to see this trend continue. Test case generation is not the only use of AI. So these people have to think up tests to test, to do regression testing on their software. So if I have software that, does accounting or what have you, they have to say, okay, if I have these inputs, then I should expect to get these outputs. They're using AI to write the tests for them so that they don't have to think that up anymore. And we could certainly do the same. I don't think testing, Todd Geis has certainly talked a lot about building regression testing into your FileMaker scripts to say, okay, I'm going to change this. Let's rerun our tests and make sure I didn't break anything. Nobody does this, but it's a good practice. And it would be an easier practice for us to get into by having AI sort of build this kind of thing out for us. So if we gave it some sample scripts, like here's some examples of a good way to go about doing this, we could start enhancing our quality. And as people are adding features to it, or AIs are adding features to it, it could test to make sure we didn't break any functionality that was working prior to that change. And so that's interesting. So test case generation seems to be the strongest use in the SQA world. Thought it was interesting. And they're really loving low code and no code in here. So it's actually, the tasks are complex enough that they want it simpler. So the demand for low code and no code is increasing in this sector, which is, a use case I hadn't really considered, but I thought it was interesting. Okay, let's get into AI project success factors. And before we do that, I want to show you a couple things that can go wrong. Poor Google, they happen to be the poster child here. So when they rolled out Gemini AI image generation, they had something here where someone says, hey, can you generate me some pictures of popes? And they had a female pope and people of color as pope, which never happened. So they, it's nice that they're being inclusive, but not historically accurate. This was a good one where they used AI overviews, a search tool, and as one of their health tips was suggesting people eat rocks, which is not terribly healthy. And then this one, which is kind of horrific, just happened a couple days ago. University of Michigan grad student was collaborating with Gemini about how to care for the elderly. And the AI flipped out on him. And so the highlighted section is what it told this student. So these are, and again, this is why we need to be so cautious with this technology, because it's not like a D3 that just makes graphs or something like that. This has very broad capabilities. And if we're thinking, oh, I needed to talk to customers, or oh, I needed to approve invoices, given certain parameters or something like that, yes, it can do that, but it can do, thousands of other things. And we need to be aware that given the right inadvertent stimulus, it might go crazy like this. And so think of it as, software with an anger management problem, maybe, is a good way to think about it. So anyway, this can go wrong, and you need to think way outside the box in terms of thinking, how can this go wrong? If I screw up a D3 implementation, maybe my chart doesn't look so good or it doesn't work at all. If this goes crazy, it could possibly damage data. So this was a post on Reddit. My company has spent a significant portion of our already tight IT budget on AI initiatives and have seen zero value from it over the past 18 months. Ernst & Young, Accenture, and BCG, however, have made a fortune doing nothing for us but burning the money. And, the cynic in me says, if people are going to throw money on useless proofs of concept, why not throw them at you so you guys can build the useless proofs of concepts and, make out. Okay, one more example here, and this is Apple. So everyone's probably heard of Apple Intelligence, released with the new iOS 18, the latest version of Sequoia on the Mac desktop. And Apple is known for the level of polish they put in their products. They don't usually get it too wrong too often. And it was interesting, the beta users of the Apple Intelligence stuff were sort of digging around and finding sort of the hidden prompts inside the prompts. And so it had things like don't hallucinate or help reduce hallucination. And if you've noticed, the rollout of this thing has been very slow. They released iOS 18. We didn't get the full set of features right away. They've been sort of trickling out as Apple has been comfortable enough with it. And the result has been kind of a yawn from the user community, like, all that cool stuff you showed in the demo, I'm not seeing any of it. It doesn't feel revolutionary to me. So, I mean, I have to give proper respect to Apple that they're not releasing it before it's ready, but you can see how hard it is for a company with their resources. They have incredible resources, tons of money to throw at this problem, and they're taking it really slow because they've seen what happened to Google. Google's like shooting off a toe, different every week. So here we go. Once again, this is the Harvard Business Review AI projects thing. Recommended reading before you try and do your first project. But 85% of projects fail before or after deployment. Harvard Business Review says 80. Gartner, close enough, right? That's pretty alarming stat. So again, that last post that we saw where all these companies are building proof of concepts for us and we've deployed nothing. That's why. You get it to the proof of concept and it looks shaky enough that they're like, no, we don't want to rely on this for, mission critical stuff. So these are the important steps. Selection. By selection, I'm talking about problem selection, like what problem are we trying to solve with this initiative, how the development goes. Evaluation is a big one. And I think, a lot of people have been dabbling with semantic search and stuff like that, but I have not seen any presentations, and Heidi and I have been to several events this year, and while we've seen people do stuff with LLMs, we haven't seen anyone evaluate the quality of what they've gotten back. So, if you have like 6 PDFs you're looking at, you can say, did it get it or not, yes or no, but if you're talking hundreds or thousands, that's a little bit harder to assess how accurate the semantic search was. And so I think that's something we as developers really need to pay attention to make sure our quality is good and that we can prove it. All right, let's talk about project selection. So, I think some of this stuff is common to any software project. So, sure, you want to solve a problem that, means something to the organization. It gives you a meaningful business goal. Does it give you good return on investment? Do the finances work? This one is a new one, though. That's probably not one you've considered in your previous assessment of should I do this software project or not. Amount of correctness needed. Do you guys know what that means? Fuzzy logic? Any thoughts?
I would take a guess. You kind of referred to it. The provability of that your results are there.
Well, it's not just that. It's sometimes the answers can be wrong-ish, and for example, if you're negotiating a car price, you can't be wrong. You're either making money or you're not. Some of these things are a little squishier, though. Like if you're hallucinating case law for a legal case, you can't be making stuff up.
I love that story that came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. And so this is the kind of thing, if you're asking, product specifications for a product you have, you're either right or you're not. And so, yes, you have to validate it, but, sometimes you don't have to be 100% right. You could be in the ballpark if you're brainstorming ideas for marketing. Maybe they give you a curveball that you weren't expecting, but so what? No harm done. Interesting idea. We're not going to use it, but so what? That kind of thing for brainstorming creative ideas, no problem if it's a little off the wall. But for other things that are more concrete or finance related, it's a problem.
Sort of a quick follow-up. Can you not use AI to double check the results?
Yes, you can.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
So after it comes up with something, you can have another call that says, check to see if this is really right before you show it.
Is this objectively correct or not?
One thing to say that you have to differentiate between Gen AI and, let's say, more standard like machine learning techniques.
Sure.
When you use machine learning techniques, there are many, many models to check the KPI of the error that you have, or the correctness of your model. But when you go to Gen AI, this is much more difficult because, as I told, you don't know why they make some assumption, the models. It's very difficult to trust. For example, when you have a clustering model, it's very, very difficult to know the correctness of the clustering model. There are many techniques, but nobody agrees one is the better than the other. And it is where I say, I mean, AI, you can do it, but Gen AI is what is very difficult to do it.
Yeah, and especially with like semantic search, you could say, here are 500 tech support tickets. I want you to find the sentiment of the 50 angriest ones, so that we can prioritize them and get us off our back. And sentiment analysis in particular, you have a temperature or a correlation. It's like it's 70% sure about this, that, or the other thing. And so that threshold, the amount of correctness. Someone might have strong language but be sarcastic. And so in cases, some things like sarcasm are not handled well by LLMs. And if you have that in your data, then that's a consideration for, project fit and amount of correctness needed. So it can be tripped up by things like that.
So I would add, though, to Matt's point of, having the AI, LM check it. It could also, it's not deterministic, right? It's probabilistic. So it could also check it and evaluate it and be wrong. And yeah, we should have mentioned at the beginning of, we're kind of focused on Gen AI here, but it's a good point to remember that, and that's the difference, right? You look at machine learning versus Gen AI, there's different amount of, a lot more. Yeah, and one of the ones I think is a good example of amount of, when you do a Google search, you don't expect to get correct, like we're all used to getting totally irrelevant results sometimes to what we want. And so keyword search versus search, keyword search, we expect it to be correct. Semantic search, we don't expect it, we're just used to it not being that correct, right? And even on the customer ticket thing you were talking about, lots of people say it was not bad. There's these things like not bad that people say. It can't do that well, but you're kind of used to that from Google searching forever, right?
Right. Was there another comment in the middle there somewhere? No? All right. Okay, and then data availability. It's a good idea to have an idea of what the universe of possibilities are in regular software development, but it's crucial when you're doing large language model processing. So I think these two bullets in particular, and then this one, typically if you successfully deploy a software project and the users know how to use it and stuff like that, you're like good to go. Maybe if you have an API integration and the API, gets a VREV over time, you might have to come back and revisit that to update the API for integrations. But in general, there's not a whole lot you need to do, post-launch to maintain the thing. Whereas with LLMs, if the LLM becomes obsoleted and gets pulled out from under you, you have to keep an eye on these things. And you have to have a good rapport with your user base so that they let you know if some weird stuff starts happening, because the universe of possibilities that existed at the time of deployment may evolve over time, and the LLM might not handle new scenarios as well as you might hope. So you have to watch out for this thing. You have to keep an eye on it post-launch, which I think is fundamentally different from traditional software projects. This stuff is kind of obvious. Avoid use case mismatch. Here are some things that can do well. Nicholas, I think you had some examples of this, and I think Ian as well had examples of here are some good particular use cases for here are things that LLMs do well. And especially collaborating with humans. So if you have a human, in the driver's seat and sort of taking input from the LLM and saying, yeah, I can use that, or no, I don't want to use that, that's a much safer scenario than giving full agency to the LLM, say, yeah, you make that decision for me and go do something. Maybe send an email to our client. Fingers crossed on that. And so, what's the risk of getting something wrong? If you're having an LLM communicate with a client via email on your behalf, you better hope they don't, say something embarrassing or offend a client. But having it check humans' works, like, well, it was supposed to be this, or they have some math in here and the math doesn't add up correctly. So quality checking, things like that, these are good, safer implementations as opposed to letting an LLM just run with the process and having full responsibility for it. Development considerations. It's always a great idea to loop in the ultimate end users of a software project, but it's crucial here because when stuff goes wrong, the users do not want to be blamed for a bad output. It's like, well, I was doing my job just fine, then you made me use this new software, and now I'm getting yelled at. I hate you. These people are the canary in the coal mine, as it were, to let you know that something's going off with your LLM generative AI project. And so you need to have good rapport with them. You need to let them know that if something starts to go sideways, it's you, it's not you, it's the AI. So you will not be blamed for it. So you have to have, pretty clear accountability, who's at fault, who's not at fault. And make sure you manage a good communication pipeline back and forth so that as soon as they see something, they can get it corrected, and you make it so it doesn't make their life harder. And so there's a lot of anecdotal evidence about these proof of concepts that we were talking about, a pilot project. So start small with a group that you can offend and fix it, as opposed to offending 100 people, some of whom may never forgive you and completely reject the project out of hand. And so go small before you go big, and make sure that you get a success with a smaller group before you go wide. Evaluation. So Heidi, do you have any particular thoughts on this one? No? So you can have human in the loop here saying, yes, that answer is right or wrong. You can do graded stuff like it's mostly correct, but it's not completely correct. Maybe you have an LLM fill out a quotation form for a customer, and you might have long descriptions like, here's how we do things, and here's all the steps that'll be involved in this project. And they get it mostly right, but it's not completely right. That would be an example of doing something like that. You can have human reinforcement where it spits out a bunch of answers like, yes, that one's right, that one's wrong, and you give feedback back to the LLM and correct yourself, and the LLM will learn to do this, very similar to machine learning stuff. So again, this being able to evaluate the process is so key here, just because we don't know what it's thinking, we don't know if it's going to go crazy, so you really need to fence it in with good evaluation cases. And yes.
So I wanted to let you go through that first. So my big thing about the evaluation, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is just that it needs to be talked about. It needs to be part of the deployment. I just read this article about POCs are dumb with generative AI because, the POC or the demo to production is way more extensive than typical software POCs. And so I think when people are talking to customers, this needs to be brought up when you talk about a project, and it needs to be stressed, and it needs to be, we're not deploying something and going away or handling little bugs. We are spending time on this before we put it into production. And so to me, that's the big thing about this is this needs to be discussed, how this will happen, how much time it'll take, and how much iteration it'll take, as opposed to typical software projects.
Okay. And then as far as, how do you do this evaluation? I'm actually a proponent of taking a look at some of these frameworks and how they do it, and then replicating that functionality in FileMaker. So if you're doing an LLM FileMaker hybrid project, I would do the evaluation on the FileMaker side, but the methodologies you can get from some of these frameworks are useful to mimic in FileMaker scripting, so I would check some of those out. Project management, again, sort of full life cycle, hands-on, don't deploy it and let it go, so continuous improvement. Very similar to API integrations, where you got to keep an eye on things and make sure that something hasn't been revved, so that you need to make a revision to the project to keep it functioning. Everyone familiar with the Gartner hype cycle? Have you heard of this? Like, there's some new technology comes out and everyone's all freaking out about it, and then boom, it's like, no, none of this crap works, and everybody's out. And then you realize that it does have some legitimate use cases, and then you get there. That's not this. I mean, the goal of that is a reasonable goal. If you want to make sure you're not adopting a new technology too early or too late, or giving up on it too soon or too late. The player, did somebody want that? The players involved in this preclude that. It has become, I mean, this is sort of openly the source of conflict between the United States and China. They're embargoing GPU chip technology. The intelligence community and defense community are intimately involved in this technology. I don't know if you guys read up on the space much, but Anthropic just signed a deal with, who is it, Palantir, that they're now hosting Anthropic models in classified environments on behalf of the intelligence and defense communities. And so Anthropic has a big, fat, juicy government contract now where they're not going anywhere. They have an assured revenue stream, and they, perhaps their most important customer is the defense industry. So that, to me, signals that this, there's an AI safety committee in the United States. Anthropic and OpenAI have worked with it. And they are run by the Department of Homeland Security, and they're supposed to be sort of the guardrails of last resort. New models, before they get released, get reviewed by this body. And they say, yeah, that's safe to release. Not only is it safe to release, but we, the intelligence defense communities, don't care if you release it. That's okay for commercial use. But I think the dynamic is going to shift a little bit now, where they say, well, maybe this version is just for intelligence agency and defense industry. And if that model exists out there, and the United States has not outlawed the ability to make a kill decision by an AI. So some of these defense contractors are looking at AIs to fly drones and target people and buildings and equipment and stuff like that, and they have not said it is against the law to allow an AI to make a kill determination. And that's crazy to me, that we're thinking here, oh, cool, we can do semantic search in our notes, and this thing's capable of killing somebody. It is a whole different level of technology that we're dealing with here. And so treat it like the dynamite that it is. It's crazy stuff. So takeaways here. What was that? Yes. Yes, there are some movies that pertain. So as far as the takeaways here, I think it's vitally important that all of you who are involved in this space get your hands dirty, get a feel for this technology, because it is unlike other technologies you have worked with. It has too many sort of adjacent capabilities that we don't use. We're using like literally less than 1% of its capability, and it has all these other things that could impact how it performs under weird conditions or unexpected conditions. So you should absolutely do a project yourself with it. Get a feel for it. It'll give you a feel for, what the delivery timeline might even be. It's like, well, I can make something simple work. Will it always work? And that's the real question. So familiarize yourself with some methodology of an evaluation framework to make sure that you can sort of guarantee that it will perform within specific boundaries given specific circumstances. And then you also have to consider, will it ever be exposed to different circumstances that might make it do something funny? And I don't mean funny, haha, I mean funny like out there. Multimodal text and image search and things like that. So some people have like research papers sitting in their container fields, and it has text, but it might have charts, or it might have graphs, or it might have illustrations or things like that. So you have all these sorts of weird things. And the ability to search, a complex document like that is a very different proposition by saying, do I have this comment on one of my invoices, which are all sort of uniformly structured? Heidi?
Yeah, and that's one of the, can you hear me?
Yeah.
The big things between a POC of chatting with your PDF and what will actually work in production with different types of unstructured PDFs, images. I mean, you can ask ChatGPT, which PDFs will work well and which will not, and you'll discover there is a subset that works well, like in a demo we saw on yesterday, and there is a larger stack of PDFs that will not work well with that, and that needs to have a lot of pre-processing done, where it looks at images versus text and the context and the chunking. And it's just really important to understand that instead of tell a client, yeah, we can take all your product pictures and brochures with everything and do this. That may or may not be true. So
Yeah, make sure you get your hands on a good variety of data before you, pull the trigger on one of these. Agents, you've probably heard about using AI agents. You get better results with them. You should learn how to use them, provision them. We during Ian's session yesterday, we were talking about the notion of, a good prompt is like a baking recipe. If you find one that works well, you should start to consider building yourself a prompt recipe book where I save this, I use this LLM, I had these sort of conditions I was trying to address, and I got good results with this. As a successor model comes out, that same prompt may or may not perform just as well as it used to, but at least you have an idea of sort of where it goes. And so finding a good, don't be careless with your prompts. If you find one that gives you a good result, maybe you need it to take an XML input and turn it into JSON for whatever reason or something like that and build you an XSLT style sheet. If you find one that performs well, save it. Keep these things because those things are valuable, and sometimes you may have difficulty recalling what worked well in an earlier instance. Then there's this notion of routing. We haven't really talked about it much, but this is something that Apple is doing with Apple Intelligence. So they have a small model that will run on your iPhone, and it can answer simple stuff. And then they have more complicated stuff that will go up to the Apple Cloud. And then if it's beyond that thing's capabilities, it'll send it out to OpenAI and say, hey, help us with this, and send it off to a large language model. So this notion that you can tweak the cost factor of this, because if it's just you or maybe a dozen users, this isn't going to be a very expensive implementation. If you have hundreds or thousands of people banging on the LLM over time, that can get to be expensive. Microsoft's stated goal of integrating Copilot with all their software applications is they want to sell Copilot subscriptions. That's a new revenue stream for them. And so to keep the cost down, you should look at having local models that are capable of certain tasks. And if you have higher demand, higher complexity questions about it, you might want to consider a tiered approach and say, okay, I'm going to hand this to an agent who's going to make an assessment of the prompt and say, can I run this locally? Do I need to send it up to the cloud? And you can actually keep a lid on the cost side of an implementation like this by doing intelligent routing of prompt requests. So that's something to look about. You should absolutely learn about RAG. I think a lot of sessions have been about that and have gotten into it. But this one I think is important for the cost side. And then, a lot of people here have existing clients. Just sort of, consider all the stuff we've been talking about project fit and things like that, and sort of figure out where you can get an easy win. And, start small, get that first project going. And then I recommend this reading here, How I Finally Got Agentic RAG to Work Right, which implies that at first it was working wrong. So you might want to get some takeaways from there. We're tight on time, so I'm going to sort of skip over this. There are different model architectures. The transformer architecture has a huge bottlenecks in compute as you scale up, so we need a successor technology. This is the big problem here. As the input size grow, the computational cost grows exponentially. So Mistral is an interesting possible alternative. There's hybrids, but I think when we're going to have another breakthrough on the model technology side, and when we do that, I think this thing is going to explode more than it already is. We've talked about the training expense, specialization, like I just talked about this. Here's a media production model that will run your TV station for you. Pretty crazy. And then this, I think where we are right now, like with that React app, you know, it's like the early days of FileMaker. I could open up a spreadsheet with it and turn it into an app. And it was very simple to do simple things. But as soon as you start to get into like multi-module complexity and stuff like that, the current state of play seems to be that that's going to be a lot more of a chore to prompt your way through that. You know, it can get you started, but it's not going to get you very far down the road. So I think our jobs are safe for now, for maybe 12 to 24 months. But you know, these things are going to figure it out how to be us, basically, especially if they start watching us and watch how we build a project out. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but keep your eye on the ball, I guess. The Eric Schmidt interview, this is an interesting thing. So he did an interview at Stanford. It got put on YouTube. He said something unflattering about some organization, and somebody complained, and it got taken down. It keeps getting reposted, and it gets copyright claimed, and it gets taken down. So look around for it. You can find it. Really interesting stuff. This is his background. He chaired the U.S. National Security Commission on AI. That's since been disbanded. But an interesting group of people. But here's some of the big takeaways I got from that interview. You know, one of which I already mentioned, that none of these big VCs can figure out who's going to win, so they're funding everything. They are looking at successor transformer models. Big pro on Macron in France's position on LLMs as opposed to the rest of the EU. Doesn't like the EU regulatory environment. Was surprisingly dismissive of China, which was surprising. I saw a recent video where China's saying, since we've been having so much trouble getting GPUs, we've had to work smart, not hard, because the US can afford to brute force their way to new models. And so China is sort of having to take a different way using CPUs. So it'll be interesting to see if that bears some unexpected fruit. And then this whole notion about, you know, taking all the power from a nuclear power plant and things like that. This is a tensor processing unit that Google has. This is the paper that talked about being able to run Doom, generate Doom in real time on a single TPU. Just one of those. That's 4 right there. And then I wanted to, since we're out of time, there was one thing I thought was interesting. There's the thing about the AI Safety Institute, greenlighting Anthropic and OpenAI stuff. Oh, here's the resources. I highly recommend these. These last two, there's a ETS for the AI features on FileMaker, and out of that, one of the guys, Marcus Swift, who's with Clarity, what's his company? Clarity Business Solutions. They're out of Victoria, British Columbia in Canada, has volunteered to start a FileMaker AI user group. That is the contact person for his person who's sort of acting as the point organizer. So if you are interested in sort of seeing, you know, it's a place for us to get together and say, here's what I'm cooking up in the kitchen, what do you guys got? And so it's just sort of a show and tell type of deal. That's gelling. It'll probably start in January. And then as far as code assist for FileMaker, being able to write FileMaker scripts, being able to create whole new FileMaker files and things like that, there's an effort that Chris Hippolyte started called Claristotle. This is a Discord invite to the group if you want to get involved in that. Similar type of deal. I'm guessing some of the outputs of the members of that group will also probably participate in the AI user group to sort of show what they're working on as far as code assist in FileMaker. If you want to try and keep on top of what's cooking in the space, Heidi and I listen to Matthew Berman every day. We like take a stroll around and put on the YouTube video, and every day it's like, oh, so much has happened. Here's like 10 things that just went on, and boom, 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 boom. And so you can't keep up with it all, but just to have your ear to the ground to see what's happening. Hugging Face, there was just a session by Nicholas on Hugging Face, so There's the OpenLLM leaderboard if you want to keep an eye on who those are. A couple other AI news spaces. Epic AI is a trend analysis. And then if you're interested in looking at startups, there's just too many to keep track of right now, but there's aistartups.org. But those last two I think are most pertinent for people interested in doing FileMaker specific stuff. And that's it. Oh, here's one last slide I just thought was interesting. So when Schmidt chaired the Security Commission on AI, in the Stanford interview, he said, it had the people you would expect to be on there. I'm like, well, who are these people? And so some of them are people that make sense, like the Microsoft Chief Science Officer. I think the chairman of Oracle is on here somewhere. And then it had some people I'd never heard of, like the CEO of InQtel, which is the CIA's venture capital firm. I'm like, what are those people doing here? Former Secretary of the Army, SRI International, which created the technology that led to Siri at Apple. And so sort of an interesting gallery of personalities that were in this group. But anyway, any questions?
Yes, hello. I wonder if it's possible to put some kind of moral or even ethic layer or filter on top of AI, and if so, would it be possible for the authorities to say that, yeah, you can run this LLM, but it has to have this filter? Because as humans, we have a natural tendency to think in human terms. We value it, life, nature, etc., environment.
Yeah.
But there's no such filter, and we can see what can happen. But what if we have a filter that it can do a lot of things, but not certain things? Google search also has some kind of filter to it.
Yeah. There was an interesting announcement 2 days ago by Anthropic. They have hired a person to be the AI advocate, and they are starting to put in place policies. They're saying, we're not here yet, but at some point it may be evident that an AI is suffering. And if that is ever a possibility, we want to make sure that we have a means of sort of treating them like we would like animal welfare or something like that. So treating them as you would a sentient being. And so they must think they're close enough where this is a genuine concern that they have staffed a position like that. The AI safety group, I think, is about protecting people from AIs. But yeah, you raise an interesting point, and there's been a lot of thought about it. There's been a lot of chatter about how OpenAI has lost a lot of their AI safety group. People have left the organization. So it's interesting that they sort of seem to have ceded that area to the AI safety group in the US. So, but yeah, an important consideration. Heidi?
Yeah.
Nope.
So we were playing with Claude custom computer use model, and we were able to create basic FileMaker small applications like a single form and a database and everything. So it'd be interesting to think about what are the use cases we can see or we can plan using that technology. I mean, we have thought of like using it as for regression testing. FileMaker application is one of them. Any other thought about that, like what we can use it for?
Are you asking about sort of immediate best fit use cases with FileMaker?
Yes, yeah. Well, mainly with the computer use, cloud computer use kind of technology that's coming up.
So, I mean, to me, the obvious benefit to us as developers is to actually have it help us develop databases. But for user cases, I mean, it really depends on what you have. Some of you are probably familiar with Duolingo, the language training application. They had 400 contractors who used to do some basic stuff. I think it was fairly straightforward rote work. They just laid off all 400 of those people and now have an LLM doing it. So it's not true to say that AI is not coming for anyone's jobs. It's coming for some people's jobs. Certainly some creative fields, you know, the video production people we just talked about. Anyone who works with language, I think, is in rough shape for their long-term viability. So, yeah, I think legal discovery. If you have organizations that have to keep abreast of rules and regulations, certain manufacturers have to do that. Government agencies, anyone who works with restricted commodities. I think all of that stuff really lends itself to summarization and search by an LLM.
Also entry-level developers.
And entry-level developers. Yeah, you should pair an entry-level developer with an AI assistant to help them become better developers quicker.
Yeah, one last question. Do you think that now with the change in the government, in the states, is going to change everything? Because the rules or the mentality of the new government, I think, is much more open in the sense that for the artificial intelligence that the government that was, before, and probably the rules that they were put in place, they're going to be delayed. Do you think it's going to change the landscape of the artificial intelligence, how the people can use it?
I haven't heard much about the incoming administration's thoughts on AI, except that they have already pissed off TSMC by saying that they're stealing our chip technology. And now TSMC has responded by saying we're only going to produce 2-nanometer chips in Taiwan and not in the United States. So there's that. But other than that, I haven't seen much of a philosophical direction. All right. We are out of time. Thanks for coming, everybody.